Virgil's knife bit into the wire before he thought about it. The metal snapped and the woman cried out, not loud, just sharp, like pain pulled thin. Her wrists were raw and bleeding where the wire had been twisted tight. Her boots barely touched the dirt, toes scraping, knees buckling. She hung there like something left out to dry. She jerked when he grabbed her arm. "Don't touch me." His voice came out rough. "I already am." He cut again, faster now. The fence creaked under her weight. She hissed through her teeth. "They'll come back." He didn't look up. "Then they'll see me standing here." The last wire gave way and she sagged into him. He caught her without asking. Her head hit his shoulder. She smelled like dust and blood and sunburned cloth. She pulled back, eyes wide, scanning the road. "You shouldn't be here." He steadied her. "You shouldn't be tied up." She laughed once, empty. "That's their fence." He looked at the posts, the stretched wire, the clean gravel path beside it. Someone had lined her up right where passing trucks could see. A pickup idled down the road, slowed, then kept going. No one stopped. She followed his eyes. "See?" He nodded. "They meant you to be seen." She tried to step away and nearly fell. He held her elbow. "Let go." "Not yet. You don't know me." "I know what I see." She swallowed. "You see trouble." "I see a person." She shook her head. "You see a mess that'll stick." He finally met her eyes. "Already has." She pressed her back to the fence, like it could still hold her. "Don't call anyone." "Wasn't planning to." "Don't ask my name." "I won't." "Don't stay." He looked down the road again. Dust hung low. "I'm not leaving you here." Her jaw tightened. "They own this stretch. They own the law. Then they'll have to talk to me." She stared at him like she was measuring weight. "You a hero?" "No, then why?" He thought of the wire biting into skin, the way nobody stopped. "Because I didn't look away." A horn sounded somewhere far off. She flinched hard. "We need to move." He guided her toward his truck parked crooked in the grass. She resisted once, then gave in, limping. "If they see you with me." They already did. He opened the door and helped her up. She paused, looking back at the fence, the wire ends curled like fingers. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. "They'll say you did this." He shut the door halfway, leaned in. "Then they can say it to my face." He closed the door. The lock clicked. The engine turned over. The fence stood empty, wire humming in the heat. The truck rolled onto the dirt road, engine humming low, tires chewing the gravel. Eliza shivered against the seat, shoulders tight under the thin jacket. Virgil kept both hands flat on the wheel, eyes on the road but ears open to every sound, wind in the weeds, a branch snapping, the hum of distant tires. Neither spoke at first. The silence pressed around them, heavy, the kind that makes every breath loud. Finally, she asked, "You married?" He didn't glance at her. "No," she exhaled, almost relief. "Good." "Why?" "Means they'll hurt you less." He didn't answer immediately. The truck bounced over a pothole. Dust kicked up behind them. "Who tied you up?" he asked. She swallowed, looking at her hands, dirty and scratched. "Men. Land men. Men with badges." He tightened his grip on the wheel, knuckles white. "And you thought being left in the sun would stop them?" "I thought being left might be noticed. Maybe someone would see." He nodded slowly. "I saw." She gave him a sidelong glance, wary. "You didn't just see me. You stopped." "Yeah." Her lips pressed thin. "You didn't have to." "I didn't have a choice." She exhaled, almost a laugh, bitter. "So this is defiance?" "Call it what you want." A truck passed them at a crossroads. Chrome caught the sun, a badge glinting in the side mirror. She flinched. They're out there. Watching. Yeah, he said, voice low. And they'll see us both. Silence fell again. Then, almost timidly, she asked, "Do you know where we're going?" "Somewhere I can make sure they don't follow." The road stretched ahead, heat waves rising off the dirt, horizon blurred. She shifted, finally letting herself sink into the seat, but her hands trembled against her lap. What if they come while we're moving? They won't. Not yet. The truck rattled over another washboard patch. Dust puffed at the tires. She looked down at the blood drying on her wrists. "I can't believe you just saved me." "Don't thank me. Just don't look back." She hesitated. "You won't leave me?" "Not with them still out there." Another silence. Then, almost whispered, "Do you do this for everyone?" He glanced at her side eye. "No. Only the ones tied to fences in the sun." She tried to focus on the road ahead, the way the weeds leaned in the heat. "You didn't have to stop." "I did." The words were simple, flat, like a stone. "Because?" "Because someone had to." She nodded, slow. "Then I guess that's enough reason." The truck crested a small rise. Ahead, a gate appeared, iron dark against the sun. She leaned forward, voice low. "If I stay, they'll come." He eased the truck onto the driveway, tires crunching over gravel. They were already coming. Dust swirled behind them. She exhaled, tension sliding from her shoulders, though her eyes never left the tree line. The gate stood between them and whatever was chasing. For the first time, she didn't ask what would happen next. He didn't promise safety. He only drove forward. The fence, empty and humming under the sun, receded behind them. The truck's engine rolled steady. Breath and dust mingled in the cab. Outside, the world waited, quiet but watchful. She finally spoke, almost casual. "Do you always carry a gun?" "Always." "And a knife?" "Always." "Even for fences?" "Especially for fences." A faint smile crossed her face. "Then maybe I'm not as alone as I thought." "You're not," he said. The truck rumbled past the last crossroads, tire marks and dust, engine humming like a heartbeat. Silence settled between them, but not the kind that scares. This was a waiting silence, alert and tense. Eliza stared out the window, shoulders loose but eyes sharp. "What's your name?" she asked. He didn't answer. "Virgil," she said, guessing. "Yeah," he replied, eyes forward. "Call me that if you like." She nodded. The truck rolled on, shadows lengthening. Somewhere beyond the bend, land stretched wide, unclaimed and quiet. The sheriff's badge in the other truck had disappeared behind a rise. The air smelled of dust, heat, and something wild, something that had been waiting for them both. Neither spoke for a while. Engines, gravel, wind. She finally said, "Do you ever stop?" "Not when it matters." The truck slowed at a gate. Iron bars black against the dying light. She glanced at him. "We're here. For now." She unbuckled, stepping lightly, legs stiff from the ride. The gate creaked as he pushed it open. They drove through, dust swirling behind, the fence fading in the rearview. For the first time, she let herself imagine standing somewhere that wasn't a trap. He glanced at her, calm but alert. "You ready?" She nodded. "Yeah." The truck rolled past the first buildings of his ranch. Heat waves and quiet fences and waiting shadows. She caught her breath, watching the horizon, and whispered, "Then I guess we keep moving." He didn't answer. He only drove forward, past the empty roads, past the heat, past the ghosts of fences yet to be built. The truck slid into the yard. Dust settled behind them. She exhaled and leaned back, still tense, still alive. He killed the engine. Silence. Wheels stopped. Nothing moved except the wind teasing the weeds. She met his eyes. Then what? We figure it out, he said. The gate swung closed behind them. The truck's engine was still warm. Shadows leaned long across the yard. Dust and heat and silence. They were inside, for now. Safe, for now, but the world still waited outside, watching. And both of them knew, without speaking, that no one would forget this drive, this choice, this crossing. They had both stepped into something they could not undo. The air smelled of dust and iron. Heat clung to their skin. Her hands, raw and trembling, rested in her lap. He didn't offer comfort, only presence. Outside, the road stretched, empty, ready to swallow anyone who followed. Inside, the cab smelled like blood and metal and heat. She closed her eyes, letting herself lean into the seat. For the first time, she could almost breathe. The fence, the wire, the men who left her, gone. For now. The truck idled in silence. Shadows shifted. Dust settled. He glanced at her. You'll need to tell me something. What? Your name. She shook her head. Not yet. He nodded. Engine cooling. Gravel crunching. Shadows lengthening. She let herself sink, finally, almost trusting. The road waited behind them. Ahead, the yard, the house, and heat-baked fences. They had made it this far. No one spoke. No one moved. Only the hum of the truck and their own breathing, steady now. The horizon was wide. The heat hung low. Dust in the air. Silence, tense but calm. She looked out the window, watching weeds sway. Do you ever sleep? When I have to. And hope? All the time. They rode forward, toward a house with no locks and fences that promised nothing. The truck idled, waiting, and the sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched long and thin, touching them both. They had each other. For now. That was enough. The gate creaked as Virgil pushed it open, dust puffing in lazy clouds. Eliza followed, boots scraping the gravel. The house stood low and wide, wood sun-bleached and unpainted, boards warped in long lines like the back of some old animal. The door groaned when he swung it, and inside smelled of dry wood and dust and something faintly metallic, like old blood or iron. She hesitated at the threshold, eyes moving quickly over the furniture, the empty chairs, the shelves with jars long forgotten. You trust folks too much, she said, voice quiet but sharp. He didn't turn. I trust fences less, he said. She moved inside, trailing her fingers along the walls, feeling the scratches, the small gouges, the places where history had left its teeth. She bent over the sink, twisting the faucet until a weak trickle of water came out, and began cleaning the cuts on her wrists. Virgil stayed in the doorway, listening to her movements, alert to every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind through the broken window panes. Anyone ever die here? She asked after a long silence. He didn't answer. That silence was an answer in itself. She took a rag from a drawer and dabbed at the blood, wincing as she touched the bruises on her arms. The water ran red in streaks down the drain. She glanced at him. You ever kill anyone? He asked suddenly. She froze, eyes on the sink. No good. She exhaled slowly, sitting back on the edge of the counter, legs dangling. I almost hope you have, she said, voice low. So you'd know what to do with them. He didn't smile. He just leaned against the doorframe, eyes scanning the shadows. Dust moved in lazy motes around him. She finally gave her name. Eliza, she said. Eliza, he repeated, testing it in the empty room. That's good. Solid. Easy to hold on to. Outside, the light shifted. A car passed by the yard, far enough not to be a threat, close enough to stir the hair at the back of her neck. She turned back to the sink, rinsing her rag. You're quiet, she said, almost conversational, though the words carried tension. I listen, he said simply. Better than speaking sometimes. She nodded, watching her reflection in the scratched mirror. Fences, she said. They seem to follow me. They do, he agreed. They follow all of us if we let them. Her arms ached, fingers trembling as she leaned back. He stepped toward the window, hand on the sill, looking out. The shadows of the trees stretched long and thin, scraping against the walls. You live here alone? She asked. Mostly, he said. Used to be more people. Not anymore. Silence settled again. The house seemed to breathe with them, boards groaning and creaking in rhythm with their movements. She got up, brushing her hair back, and walked the length of the room, stopping at the stairwell that led to the loft. You lock doors? She asked. He shook his head. No. What for? A lock won't stop what wants in. She frowned, eyes narrowing. I like locks. They only make you pretend you're safe, he said, voice flat. Sometimes, I need to pretend. She didn't answer. She walked past the living area to a small bedroom, noting the absence of a lock on the door. The room smelled of old wood, dry air, and dust. She dropped her bag on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed, watching the ceiling. I don't want to be tied to fences anymore, she said softly. He leaned against the doorframe, silent, listening. Outside, headlights flashed briefly across the windows. A car slowed, engine humming, but didn't stop. Eliza stiffened. Someone's out there, she said. Maybe, he replied, still calm. Maybe they're just passing. She exhaled, shoulders dropping slightly, though tension still lingered in her jaw. You ever get used to this? She asked. No, he said. Never. The house seemed to close in around them, filled with old echoes and the weight of quiet lives. She moved closer to the bed, arms wrapped around her legs, staring at him. Will they come back? Maybe, he said. She nodded, small, almost imperceptible, as if taking that answer in but not liking it. And if they do? Then we face it, he said. The wind shifted outside, rattling the window frames, stirring dust motes into the air. She let her head fall back against the wall, eyes closing briefly. I'm tired, she said. I know, he said. Silence again, heavy, unbroken. Her hands rested on her knees, raw and red from the rope burns, and she traced the line slowly, almost hypnotically. You ever lose someone? She asked. Yeah, he said quietly. More than one. She looked at him, surprised by the softness in his voice. Does it get easier? No, he said. You just get better at standing. She swallowed. I don't know if I can stand. He walked toward her slowly, stopping a few feet away. Then you learn. Or you fall. Outside, the headlights passed again, slow and deliberate, then disappeared into the distance. Dust settled back onto the floors and windowsills. The house seemed to settle with them, old bones creaking quietly. Eliza finally spoke, voice low. Eliza. That's my name. I'm telling you because you didn't look away. He nodded. Good. Easy to hold. Makes it harder for them to take you again. She breathed out, almost a laugh, shaky. You're not easy to read. Neither are you, he said. They moved through the small kitchen, collecting blankets and water quietly. Outside, the trees leaned long and thin, brushing against the windows. The sun dipped lower, casting stripes of orange and gold across the wooden floors. She watched the light hit the cracks in the boards. I don't know what to do now, she said. Stay, he said. For now. She nodded, letting herself sink into a chair. The house was silent but alive, full of old memories, creaking boards, and dust motes floating in the fading sun. Shadows lengthened across the walls, pulling long fingers through the room. She watched them, feeling exposed and safe at once. Virgil stood by the window, scanning the yard and the tree-line. They might come, he said softly. She leaned back, watching, breathing slowly. Let them, she said. He looked at her, alert but calm. We'll see who stands. The house seemed to settle around them, shadows stretching, air cooling, dust settling. Silence wrapped them, tense but protective. Eliza finally let herself relax slightly, shoulders loose, though her eyes never stopped moving, scanning, always scanning. She spoke again, low. "You ever sleep?" "When I have to," he said. "And hope?" "All the time." The sun dipped further, light fading to gold and rust across the floorboards. Outside, the shadows lengthened toward them. Inside, the house held them in its quiet, breathing slowly with the rhythm of unseen lives. She exhaled, finally, letting her hands rest in her lap. He didn't offer comfort. He offered presence. And in the quiet, they both understood they had stepped into something they couldn't leave. The house with no lock seemed to watch them, old boards creaking, shadows shifting. She tilted her head back against the wall, eyes closing for just a moment. The wind stirred again, whispering through the broken panes, carrying dust and memory. She was here. Alive. For now. And he was here, too, not looking away. The evening light dimmed, shadows thickening, stretching along the floor, over the beds, into the corners. Outside, the world waited, but inside, they breathed together, caught between safety and threat, knowing the night was only the first of many. Dust settled on the window sills. Shadows pooled. Silence hummed low, and they waited, together. The knock came sharp, deliberate, on the weathered door. Virgil didn't move at first, hand resting on the frame, eyes narrowing toward the sound. Eliza froze behind him, back against the wall, shoulder pressed to the wood. Another knock. "Evenin', Virgil," came a voice, smooth and too calm. Virgil stepped forward, letting the door open a crack. The sheriff stood there, hat tipped back slightly, badge catching the last of the sun, a polite smile stretched tight across his face. "Evenin'," Virgil said, quiet, steady. The man's eyes flicked past Virgil to Eliza, taking in the way she leaned against the wall, wrists raw. "You got something that don't belong to you," the sheriff said, voice soft, almost conversational. "I got a woman who was tied to a fence," Virgil said flatly. The sheriff's smile didn't falter. "A misunderstanding, then? Maybe just a domestic thing?" His tone was honeyed, but the edge was there, sharper than the knife hidden in a pocket. Eliza stepped forward slightly, eyes on the sheriff. She didn't speak. Virgil shifted his weight, blocking any sudden movement, stance calm but unyielding. "You're alone out here," the sheriff said, still smiling. "Not tonight," Virgil replied, voice low, sure. The man's gaze lingered a moment longer, taking in the house, the yard, the small figure of the woman behind the man he already suspected had taken her. Then, finally, he tipped his hat slightly and stepped back, moving down the porch steps. Virgil watched him, eyes steady, but every muscle tense, alert. Eliza's voice came, low and wary, almost a whisper. "He'll come back with paper." Virgil didn't answer, only closed the door, letting the lock click. Dust stirred in the doorway as the sheriff's truck rumbled away slowly, engine low and quiet. Inside, Eliza sank back against the wall. "He thinks he owns this," she said, voice tight. "He thinks he can control everything with his badge." Virgil moved to the window, peeking through the cracks in the blinds. "Badges don't make men brave," he said. She watched his profile, jaw tight. "And he's not brave." Outside, the yard seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what might come next. Virgil didn't move from the window. "You shouldn't have shown yourself," he said, voice low. "I didn't," she whispered. "He saw anyway." Silence fell between them, thick and pressing. The house creaked as the wind shifted, dust motes dancing in the fading light. "You're safe, for now," Virgil said. "For now," she echoed, almost unconsciously. He turned from the window, eyes scanning the shadows inside the house, every corner, every dark shape. She followed his gaze. "Do we stay hidden?" she asked. "Until we figure the next move," he said. They moved toward the kitchen, collecting water and blankets, quietly, deliberately. Each sound was measured, each step careful, aware of the world outside that had already seen her. Outside, the wind rattled the broken window panes, carrying the faint smell of dust and distant smoke from chimneys down the road. Eliza sank into a chair, raw hands pressed into her lap. "He'll send men," she said. "Or come himself." Virgil nodded slowly, leaning against the counter, eyes dark. Either way, we won't be caught off guard. Another pause. Shadows lengthened as the sun dipped lower behind the trees. You think this ends with words? She asked. No, he said. It never does. Her eyes drifted toward the door, half expecting it to burst open. And if it comes through that door? He didn't flinch. Then we meet it head-on. Standing. She swallowed. I don't know if I can stand. He stepped closer, calm and solid. Then you'll learn. Or you'll fall. But I won't leave you tied again. Outside, the yard held its silence, the only sounds the creak of boards and the whisper of the wind through dry grass. Eliza finally leaned back, letting herself sink into the chair. Virgil moved to the window again, scanning the last of the light. For tonight, he said, voice low. We hold. She nodded. We hold. Shadows pulled across the floor, stretching long, thin, reaching toward them from the corners of the house. The air smelled of dry wood, dust, and the faint iron tang of her wounds. Silence wrapped them both, tense but protective. Eliza's hands rested in her lap, raw but slowly relaxing. Virgil stood by the window, calm, alert. The house with its open spaces, unbarred doors, and sun-bleached boards seemed alive, breathing slowly around them. Outside, the sheriff's truck disappeared down the road, leaving only dust and quiet in its wake. Eliza finally spoke, almost a whisper, will he really come back? Virgil didn't answer immediately. He only said, if he does, we'll be ready. She closed her eyes, trying to let herself believe it. Dust motes swirled in the last of the sunlight, the floorboards creaked under their weight, the air thick with waiting. Inside, the house held them, small and worn, watching silently as the evening settled. The shadow shifted across the walls and ceiling, the fading light catching the edges of every scratch, every mark, every sign of what had come before. Outside, the wind rustled the grass. The road lay quiet. The sheriff had gone, but the world beyond the boards and windows still watched, still waited. Eliza's hands clenched briefly in her lap, then relaxed. Virgil turned from the window, voice low, almost a promise. We face it together. She nodded, barely, still tense but grounded by his presence. Dust settled in streaks of gold through the room, settling over furniture, over floors, over both of them. The night had not yet arrived, but the house and the shadows and the waiting held them as one. The door stood closed, the lock clicked, and inside, they breathed, caught between the threat outside and the fragile safety inside. Silence hummed low, heavy, protective. They waited. The sheriff had left, but the world beyond still loomed. And for now, the house held them. Virgil started the truck before Eliza fully climbed in, the engine humming low across the gravel. She held onto the edge of the seat, body tense, eyes scanning the horizon. The road stretched ahead, dust hanging in lazy clouds above the dirt. You don't even know me, she said after a long silence. I know enough, he replied, voice steady, eyes on the road. She turned slightly to meet his gaze. You'd marry a stranger? I'd marry the truth if it needed a witness. Her fingers tightened on her knees, nails digging faint scratches into her skin. Witness what? That you survived, he said simply. Another stretch of empty road passed beneath the tires. The sun had dipped low, orange and hard, painting the dust and weeds with heat and shadow. She didn't speak for a while. Then, quietly, they'd kill me if I went back. Then you don't go back, Virgil said. The cab was silent except for the engine and their breathing. She looked down at her hands, raw and red from the rope, at the stains that would take days to fade. You know about them, she said. All of them? Enough to keep you alive, he said. The road curved, revealing the courthouse in the distance, low and solid, brick darkened with age. Old families had walked its steps for generations. Old grudges were stacked in its walls like firewood. Virgil guided the truck toward the parking lot, dust spilling behind them. Eliza's eyes narrowed at the building. We just walk in? We sign what we need, he said, calm, precise. She swallowed. What if they see us? Then we face them, he said, voice low. They parked. The lot was empty except for a few trucks and the glare of fading sun on windows. Inside, the air smelled of old wood, dust, and the faint tang of iron from the past. The clerk looked up as they approached, eyebrows raised. "Can I help you?" Virgil's voice was flat. "We need a marriage license." The clerk paused, flicking through papers. "That's unusual." "Same day?" "Unusual times call for unusual measures," Virgil said. Eliza's hands twisted in her lap. "Do we even know each other?" she asked. "Enough," he said. "Enough to survive." The clerk nodded slowly, as if understanding more than she wanted to admit, then leaned forward. "You're aware of what this does?" "Yes," Eliza said. "I need to be protected." "From who?" the clerk asked, voice soft. She met Virgil's eyes. "From them," she said. "They'll come back if they can." "They can't touch you now," Virgil said. "Not legally." "Paper is louder than guns," she murmured. He nodded. "But they'll still try." Outside the courthouse, shadows lengthened across the brick steps. Dust blew across the lot. A truck passed slowly, glinting chrome catching the sun. She glanced at him. "Are they watching?" "Always," he said. The weight of that knowledge settled heavy between them. They filled out the forms quickly, hands moving briskly, deliberate. Every signature a line in the sand. A name that wasn't hers, a tie to someone who could shield her. Eliza realized as she wrote it that the only safe name she could carry right now was his. The clerk nodded, stapled papers together, and handed the license back. "Signed?" she asked. "Not yet," Virgil said, voice low. Outside, men lingered across the street, trucks parked just out of reach, eyes on the building. Eliza shivered. "They're waiting," she said. "Let them," he said. "We move fast." She studied his profile, jaw tight, posture rigid. "You move like this all the time?" "When it matters," he said. "When it does, you don't wait." Another pause. She let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "So, what now?" "We get what we need. Then we leave." They walked out of the clerk's office, documents in hand, the paper feeling heavier than it looked. Virgil kept his eyes scanning, posture rigid, ready. Outside, the air was warm and dusty, wind stirring loose gravel across the lot. "Do you ever trust people?" she asked, voice low. "Only when I have to," he said. "And right now?" "I have to." Shadow stretched long in front of them, dust dancing in the fading sunlight. She followed him back to the truck. "We can't stay here," she said. "No," he said. "But this helps. For now." She glanced down at the license in her hands, fingers curling around it. This could save me." "It already has," he said. They climbed into the truck. The engine hummed beneath them. She looked out the window at the empty lot, the sun low behind the courthouse. "Do you ever wonder if it'll be enough?" she asked, almost whispering. "Not really," he said. "I just make sure it is." The truck rolled down the dusty road, leaving the courthouse behind, leaving old families and old grudges behind, dust rising behind the tires like smoke. She sank back, watching the horizon, feeling the weight of the paper in her lap, the safety it represented, fragile but real. "We did it," she said softly. "For now," he corrected, eyes forward, scanning the road. Outside, the wind moved the weeds along the shoulder, brushing the dust into little clouds that clung in the air. They drove on in silence, both aware of the watchers, both aware that the night would be long and dangerous. But for the first time in days, she felt the faintest edge of something like hope. The truck rumbled over gravel, the sun dropping low, dust settling behind them. The road ahead was wide, empty, and waiting. And for now, they were moving together, not running, but surviving, tied together by choice and circumstance, their names inked in paper that could speak louder than threats. The ranch lay quiet under the late afternoon sun, heat pressing against the wood of the house and the fence posts. Virgil moved along the edge of the corral, boots crunching the dry gravel, eyes scanning the far fields where weeds and dust tangled together. Eliza watched him from the porch, arms folded, tension coiled in every line of her body. "Your blood own this land?" she asked, voice low, careful. He stopped, leaning against a post, the muscles in his jaw tight. "It stole it first," he said finally. She studied him, eyes sharp, noticing the way the sun caught the lines in his face, the faint scars on his hands. "Then don't steal me," she said, tone flat, firm. He looked at her, the wind lifting strands of hair across her face. "I wouldn't," he said. Silence settled between them, thick, almost tangible. She shifted her weight, boots scraping the porch boards. "Marriage," she said slowly, testing the word. "You think it'll protect me?" "It's not about thinking," he said. "It's about choice. And right now, it's the only choice that buys you anything." She let the words sit, folding her arms tighter, considering. "Then we do it," she said, voice steady, deliberate. "But on my terms." He nodded. "Your terms," he said. The wind carried the faint scent of dust and hay. He moved toward the house, pausing at the doorway where a small drawer sat, old and worn. He pulled it open, fingers brushing the edges, and lifted an old marriage license, yellowed and brittle. His parents' names were inked across it, stiff and formal, bitterly bound. "They did it for appearances," he said, almost to himself. "Didn't mean anything to them." She watched him, hands still pressed to her sides. "Then we do it differently," she said. He looked up at her, eyes meeting hers, measuring the weight in them. "Different how?" "We choose it. Not out of fear, not because we have to. Out of knowing we can." The air shifted, dust swirling at their feet. He nodded slowly, understanding. "Courthouse at sunrise," he said. "We make it official before they can interfere." She exhaled, shoulders easing slightly. "Sunrise then," she said. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the low hum of distant animals and the faint rattle of a loose fence post. They moved in silence toward the corral, watching the cattle graze, listening to the faint creak of wood and the flutter of birds in the distance. "You've lived here long?" she asked. "Long enough to know what waits outside the fences," he said. She studied him, noticing the way his hands flexed and relaxed, the calm in his stance despite everything. "And inside?" "Inside is safer," he said. She let out a slow breath. "But still tense." "Always," he said. "Never fully safe. Just less hunted." She nodded, eyes moving to the horizon, dust rising from the far field. "I've been hunted," she said softly. "I don't want that again." He stepped closer, hands relaxed at his sides, not touching her but close enough she felt the weight of his presence. "Then you won't be," he said. "Not if I can help it." She met his gaze, jaw set. "I can help it too," she said. He allowed a small, almost imperceptible nod. "That's why we do this together." The sunlight shifted, casting long shadows across the yard, across the fence, across the space between them. She looked down at the dirt, then back at him. "If we do this, there's no going back," she said. "I understand," he said. "I'm ready for it." The wind moved through the trees, stirring dust into tiny columns along the dry grass. She walked toward the house, Virgil following, and paused at the porch. "We start fresh," she said, voice firm. "Our own rules." He nodded, scanning the yard, the fences, the distant tree line. "Our own rules," he echoed. The old license rested in the drawer, a reminder of how things had been, bitter and rigid. They left it behind. Outside, the ranch stretched, empty but alive with sound, cattle lowing, wind whispering, a far-off dog barking. She looked toward the horizon, toward the rising sun that would mark their ceremony, toward the choice that would anchor them both. Virgil moved beside her, boots crunching gravel, hands empty but steady. "We go at dawn," he said. "We face it together." She nodded, shoulders squared, chest rising with controlled breath. "We choose to stand," she said. The shadows lengthened, folding over the fences, the house, the yard. Dust clung to their boots. Sunlight struck the edges of the wooden posts, gleaming briefly before fading. Inside, the house smelled of dry wood and old leather. Outside, the ranch waited. They moved toward the stable, toward the gate, toward the future they had chosen. Silence hung between them, but it was the kind of silence that carried purpose, that held determination. She glanced at him, eyes sharp. "No backing out," she said. "No backing out," he agreed. The air shifted again, warm and dry, carrying the faint scent of iron and hay. The old fence post creaked in the breeze, the wood holding its place, steady and waiting. She squared her shoulders, lifted her chin. "Then sunrise," she said. "Sunrise," he echoed, voice low but certain. Dust swirled at their feet. The ranch was quiet, hot, heavy with heat and possibility. They walked slowly back to the house, together, not bound, not tied, not forced. Choice carried them, step by step, toward the first light. Shadows fell long and thin. Wind rattled the boards. The ranch waited. And both of them, together, held firm, ready to meet what came next. Dawn cut across the windshield in sharp slashes of gold and orange. The courthouse sat low and solid, brick darkened by decades, windows catching the first light. Eliza's hands rested in her lap, fingers tight around the folds of her coat. Virgil drove slowly, engine low and steady, eyes forward, scanning the empty street. "We don't have to do this," she said quietly, voice barely above the hum of the tires. "Yes, we do," he said. "We've come this far." She swallowed, jaw tight. "I don't even know what I'm saying yes to." "You'll know soon enough." The courthouse steps were worn, edges rounded by generations of boots. Dust clung to the cracks, wind lifting loose dirt. Virgil parked, engine idling, and they climbed out. Her boots crunched against the gravel, echoing in the empty morning. They moved inside, the air thick with wood, dust, and the weight of history. The clerk looked up, pen poised over the papers. "You ready?" he asked. Eliza nodded, hands folded, pulse loud in her throat. Virgil passed her the folded license. "Do you take?" the clerk began, voice formal. "Yes," she said. Quick, precise. Her voice echoed off the walls. The clerk turned to Virgil. "And you?" "Yes." No hesitation. No warmth. Just certainty. No kiss followed, only hands held too tight, fingers pressing into palms as if anchoring themselves to reality. The air smelled of old wood and dust and ink. Outside, sunlight pooled across the brick steps, highlighting every scratch, every mark, every witness left by years of people coming and going. Eliza exhaled slowly, letting herself feel the weight of the moment, of the choice, of survival inked into paper. Virgil's eyes scanned the windows, the quiet street, every shadow. "They'll see," she whispered, voice low. "Let them," he said, flat and calm. They stepped back outside. The morning air was cool, tinged with dust and the faint smell of smoke from a distant chimney. The sheriff's truck sat down the block, engine off, body still. He tipped his hat slowly, almost polite, a gesture that carried everything he hadn't said. "Congratulations," he murmured. Virgil didn't reply. Eliza didn't move, only tightened her grip on his hand. She let the air wash over her, sunlight hitting her face, warmth and weight both tangible. The street was quiet, empty except for dust and shadows, and for the first time in days, she felt a fragile, new edge of control. Paper had bound them together, but the town had witnessed it, whether it wanted to or not. Virgil guided her back to the truck, engine low and steady. They climbed in, boots scraping gravel, air tense but calmer. "Same week," she said, voice almost a whisper, "and we're already married." "Same week," he repeated. "And nothing's changed?" she asked. "Nothing's changed," he said. Dust kicked up behind the tires as they drove back down the empty road, the courthouse shrinking in the rearview. Shadows stretched long, bending over the fences and fields. Silence fell between them, but not heavy, it was tight, purposeful, carrying the weight of new beginnings and old threats alike. Eliza's eyes tracked the horizon, scanning for movement, for danger, for whatever was waiting for them next. Virgil kept his hands on the wheel, calm and alert, engine humming, eyes forward. They didn't speak for a while. Words weren't needed yet. The road stretched before them, empty but full of potential, carrying them both toward a dawn that had been decided and a future that had yet to prove itself.
The truck rolled on, dust swirling, sunlight hitting every rough edge of fence and wood.
They held hands, steady, tight, connected, each drawing strength from the other. Outside, the world waited, but they had claimed this moment.
The morning light pressed against them, warm and unrelenting.
Inside the cab, air smelled of metal and leather, paper still in her lap. Breath evened out, bodies settled, tension easing slightly. For now, the road was theirs. The courthouse was behind them. The sheriff had seen.
Witnessed.
And the paper in their hands had said yes where guns, threats, and fences had only said no. They drove on, side by side, toward the ranch, toward the sun rising fully, toward the choice they had made together. And in that quiet, between dust and light, between threat and survival, they both understood that the first step had been taken. The road stretched on.
Shadows and dust and sun mingled over fields and fences.
They drove. Hands still pressed together, the new bond solid, quiet, unbroken. Dawn lit everything, casting long lines across the land. For the first time, the week had an ending they had chosen.
And the road waited for the next step.
The heat pressed against the ranch like a weight, dust swirling around the edges of the fences. Eliza stood at the gate, eyes scanning the horizon where the corral met the far fields. Smoke from a distant fire blurred the line between sky and land. Virgil moved beside her, calm, boots crunching gravel. "You think paper stops fire?" she asked, voice low, wary. "I think fire shows itself," he said, eyes narrowing toward the far tree line. The cattle were restless, lowing, hooves stirring dust into the dry air.
Eliza's hands rested on the rail, raw but steady, jaw tight.
"They've poisoned the water," she said, voice tight.
"Fence burned last night."
Virgil didn't flinch.
"They're testing us."
She turned to him, eyes sharp.
"You call that testing?"
He looked at her calmly, a hint of steel in his gaze. "I call it knowing who stands and who falls." Silence stretched between them, punctuated by distant bird calls and the low hum of wind through weeds. Eliza's mind traced the men who had tied her up, the law bending over their shoulders, guns hidden beneath coats, badges glinting. She stepped forward, toward the burned fence, and ran her hand along the blackened wood. Smoke and ash clung to her fingers. "I'm done hiding," she said. Virgil's eyes followed hers, assessing, calculating.
"Then don't."
She squared her shoulders, moving across the corral, toward the men who had meant to scare her into silence. "You're not afraid?" she asked, voice tight. "Afraid of what?" he said.
"Losing you."
She ignored the comment, stepping further out into the open. Men had gathered near the edge of the property, their stance casual, but their eyes sharp. One of them raised a hand, and the others hesitated. "Eliza," Virgil called, calm, voice carrying across the yard.
"We're not running."
Her voice rang out, clear and sharp. "You've already lost." The men faltered, uncertainty rippling across their faces. One of them glanced back toward the burnt fence. Ash and smoke still hung low over the charred posts. "They think this land owns them," she said, low.
"They think they can scare me."
Virgil's hands flexed at his sides, ready but restrained. "You don't scare," he said, voice low, flat. Another crash of wood from the far fence line drew their attention. The men flinched, shifting uneasily. Eliza took a step forward. "See this well," she said, pointing toward the edge of the property.
"It's been here longer than any of them."
"Holds what's buried."
"Reminds them of what they've done."
Virgil's eyes followed hers, scanning the shadowed mouth of the well.
Dust and heat hung in the air. Silence again, thick and tense.
The men backed off slightly, unsure, shifting their weight, realizing the land itself had more history than their threats. "You call this justice?" one of them spat, voice low, angry. "Call it survival," Virgil said.
"Call it truth," Eliza added, voice cutting through the dust. The cattle moved uneasily, sensing tension.
Virgil and Eliza both stood solid, unflinching, eyes fixed on the intruders. The burned fence smoked lightly, blackened edges curling in the heat. "You think paper fixes everything?" one man muttered.
Eliza's eyes narrowed. "No. Paper buys time. Courage decides what comes next."
Virgil's hand brushed briefly against hers.
They test fire, he said. We see how it burns.
The men exchanged uncertain glances, stepping back slowly. Eliza's voice was quiet but sharp. You've already lost control here.
Don't pretend otherwise.
Virgil shifted, stance widening, blocking any path forward for them.
Dust swirled at their boots, heat making the edges of everything blur.
The well waited at the edge of the field, dark and silent, like a memory hungry for truth. We don't run from this, she said, voice strong.
Virgil nodded, scanning the edges of the property, hands ready, alert.
They'll test again, he said.
They always do.
Then we'll be ready, she said, shoulders squared. Silence settled, broken only by distant animal sounds, wind in the weeds, the faint hiss of smoke from the fence. The intruders lingered at the edge of the property, weighing their options, realizing they weren't the ones in control.
Eliza's eyes rested on the well, shadowed in dark.
It promised more than water, it promised the past, and the reckoning to come. Virgil's jaw tightened, eyes scanning every angle, aware of every shadow, every movement, every chance.
We show them who stands, he said quietly.
And who doesn't, she added. The heat pressed down, dust clinging, shadows stretching long over the yard.
They didn't move from their position. No fear. No hesitation. Only resolve.
Ash rose from the burned fence, dust drifted from the corral, and the well waited silently at the edge of the property. The men hesitated, then retreated slightly, realizing the land itself was on the side of those who refused to cower.
Eliza exhaled slowly, letting tension ease just a fraction.
Virgil's hand brushed hers again. They both looked at the well, at the burned fence, at the edge of the property that held more history than anyone could count.
Silence fell, heavy, tense, but theirs. Dust and heat mingled. The land remembered.
The fire had made the truth loud, and they were ready to hear it. Shadows stretched long across the yard, mixing with the smoke. They stood, solid, unflinching.
The ranch waited. And at the edge of it, the well waited too,
dark and hungry, holding secrets of everything that had come before. The rope lowered slowly into the well, frayed fibers brushing the dark water below.
Virgil's hands gripped the edge of the stone, knuckles white.
Eliza knelt beside him, eyes wide, stomach tight.
What is it? She asked, voice barely audible over the faint hiss of wind through the weeds.
He shook his head slowly.
Something old, something meant to be forgotten.
The rope snagged, tension pulling. He tugged gently, lifting the first object into the light. Bones, brittle and pale, tumbled against the stones.
Eliza gasped, hand to her mouth. Women, she whispered.
Her stomach turned, fear and recognition twisting together. Enough, Virgil said, jaw tight, eyes scanning the shadows around them.
He pulled more from the water, small personal items, bracelets, a necklace, a scarf faded with age.
Each item told a story, whispered of lives interrupted, choices forced, punishments inflicted.
Eliza's hands trembled, reaching toward one of the bracelets, letting it slip through her fingers.
They wanted me to be next, she said, voice low, almost a confession. Virgil's eyes met hers, dark and steady.
They planned it, he said. Saw you tied to a fence, thought it would be the same for you. But you didn't stay.
Silence fell, thick and suffocating, broken only by the low murmur of wind through dry grass. Eliza bent closer to the well, peering into its dark mouth. All of them, she asked, voice tight.
How many?
He shook his head.
Enough.
Her gaze lingered on the water, the objects floating like memories unwilling to sink. She swallowed hard, trying to hold the bile and terror back. We don't bury this, she asked. His hands tightened on the rope, lifting the last of the items into the sunlight. No, he said, voice low, final.
We don't bury it. Not here. Not like this.
It stays, as proof, as warning. Eliza's eyes shifted to his, fear giving way to a cold resolve. They'll come back, she said.
They'll send more.
Let them, he said. They'll see the well, the bones, the proof that they can't erase.
And they'll know we're not afraid.
She nodded slowly, the edge of determination hardening in her chest. Dust swirled around them, drifting down into the well as if the land itself remembered every wrong, every crime, every act meant to silence. Virgil stood, rope coiled in his hands, eyes scanning the horizon, every shadow, every tree line. "We keep it uncovered," he said, tone low but firm.
"So they know what the land remembers."
Eliza took a step closer, brushing dirt from her hands on her pants. "Then we'll be ready," she said.
"We'll face whatever comes next."
He nodded, eyes never leaving the distant tree line.
"Always."
The sun pressed low over the field, casting long shadows that mingled with the dark mouth of the well. Inside, the water rippled faintly, catching light on the bones and objects still floating below. Each item, each fragment, a story, a warning, a memory.
Eliza exhaled slowly, stomach still tight but resolve settling into her bones.
"We know what they are," she said.
"And now they know we do too."
Virgil stepped back from the edge, eyes scanning every movement beyond the fence, the corral, the far field.
"We don't run," he said. "We never have. Not from them, not from what's here."
She nodded, watching the well, feeling the weight of it press into her chest, but not crushing her. Dust settled, wind hummed low, and the land seemed to hold its breath. Shadows pooled along the fence line, across the corral, down the slope toward the far trees. The well remembered, the land remembered, and they were witnesses now, strong and unflinching.
"We mark this," Virgil said, voice low. "So it can't be forgotten."
She traced a finger along the edge of the stones, finally feeling a sense of clarity beneath the horror.
"We don't bury it," she said, repeating his words, a mantra, a promise. "Not ever."
He nodded, coiling the rope again, muscles tense but controlled.
"The land holds it. So do we."
Eliza's eyes scanned the horizon, the edge of the property, the far tree line where threats always waited.
"And if they come?" she asked,
voice soft but steady.
"Then we stand," he said.
The sun dipped lower, orange and gold streaking the field, casting light across dust, fence, and the open well. Silence stretched, thick but protective. The bones and belongings lay bare, testimony of past violence and power.
Eliza felt the weight of it, steadying, anchoring her.
Virgil's eyes met hers, dark, certain.
"We don't run," he said again.
She nodded, chest rising, resolve hardening. Dust swirled around them, settling into the edges of the well, the ground, the fence, the land that remembered every wrong.
Together, they stepped back from the edge, watching the shadowed mouth, knowing it held truth they could not ignore.
The ranch was quiet, hot, heavy with sunlight and memory. The well waited, dark and patient, holding what the land would never forget. They did not speak again for a long moment, standing side by side, hands brushing slightly, the silence carrying weight. The land had spoken, the bones had spoken, and they were witnesses. Outside, wind whispered through the weeds, dust settled, shadows stretched. Eliza finally said, voice low, firm, "We don't bury this."
Virgil nodded. "We don't."
The sun dipped lower, casting long lines across fence and field. Shadows pooled, dust drifted.
The well waited, silent and unyielding.
And they stood, ready, unflinching, the weight of the past pressing but no longer crushing. The land had remembered.
So had they. The flames licked the edges of the corral, hot and sharp against the early evening sky.
Smoke coiled into the clouds, black against the fading gold of sunset. Virgil's truck sat parked at the edge of the field, engine off, dust settled around the tires. Eliza stood in the open yard, boots sinking into dry dirt, raw hands gripping the fence post. "Get in the truck," he said, voice low, calm. "Not yet," she replied, eyes locked on the blaze.
The fire crackled, snapping wood, sending embers upward.
Her chest rose and fell in time with the rhythm of the burning fence. "It's all you can see," she said, voice tight, almost a whisper.
"Then see it," he said. "Don't look away."
Smoke stung their eyes, heat pressed against their skin, but she didn't flinch. She remembered the rope, the fence, the hands that had held her. She remembered every threat, every moment of silence that had carried danger like a weight.
And she stood.
"They think fire will scare me," she said, voice steady.
"They don't know what it already took to break me."
Virgil moved closer, eyes scanning the edge of the property, hands flexing, ready.
Sparks rose around them, settling in the dry grass. "Then they'll see," he said.
"See what?" she asked, voice low.
"See that you're not afraid," he said.
The fire flared higher, orange and black, swallowing fence posts, smoke drifting across the yard. Men watched from a distance, trucks lined along the far field, eyes narrowing, unsure.
Eliza's. Boots pressed firmly into the dirt, grounding herself against the heat and threat.
"It's theirs," she said, gesturing to the blaze.
"It doesn't belong to us. Doesn't own us." Virgil nodded, standing beside her, body tense, alert. "They'll learn that soon enough."
The wind shifted, sending a flurry of ash across the corral. She inhaled sharply, letting it fill her lungs, letting the fire remind her what she survived. One of the men moved closer, stepping into view, unsure. "Step back," Virgil called, voice sharp.
The man froze, hands raised slightly. Eliza didn't move, didn't flinch, only watched.
The flames reflected in her eyes, orange light dancing against the dark.
"You think this ends with fire," she said, voice low.
"It's only loud enough to make them see," Virgil said.
"The truth."
The men hesitated, uncertainty spreading across their faces. The sheriff appeared at the edge of the field, hat low, posture stiff.
"You can't fight this," he said. "You can try," Virgil said. "But the land remembers, and so do we."
The fire roared higher, consuming the last of the fence.
Ash floated down like rain, settling on boots, dirt, and skin. Eliza's hands were raw, scraped from gripping posts, but steady. She stood, chest rising with controlled breaths.
"I won't run," she said, voice clear.
"Not this time."
Sparks danced around her, wind carrying the sharp scent of burning wood. Virgil's eyes scanned the edges of the property, every shadow, every movement, every possibility.
Men shifted uneasily, uncertainty and fear threading through them.
The sheriff's jaw tightened, tension obvious in the set of his shoulders. "State men are coming," Virgil said, voice low but calm. The sheriff froze, eyes widening, realizing he had no leverage. Engines roared in the distance, rolling down the dusty roads, state trucks carrying authority beyond the reach of fear and threat. Eliza stepped forward, boots firm on the scorched earth, fire reflecting in her eyes.
"This land," she said, voice strong, "holds what you can't burn. What you can't erase." Flames consumed the last of the fence posts.
Smoke curled into the sky, the acrid smell mixing with dry dust.
The sheriff's stance faltered, and the men with him shifted uneasily. Sirens grew louder, echoing through the valley, promising consequence.
Eliza didn't move, didn't step back, only watched the collapse of what had once threatened her freedom. Virgil stood beside her, hand brushing hers briefly, silent confirmation of survival and strength.
The state men arrived, guns holstered, authority clear.
The sheriff's eyes darted between them, his power dissolving in the presence of law and truth. Eliza exhaled slowly, feeling the heat on her skin, the ash on her boots, the weight of fire and witness around her. Virgil's gaze swept the yard, taking in the scorched corral, the remnants of threat, the land that had endured. "They'll remember this," he said, voice low.
"They'll know it can't be taken again."
Outside the property, dust settled in streaks, smoke lingering in the air like a warning. The sheriff was arrested quietly, state men taking control.
The fence lay in ruins, blackened wood smoldering.
Eliza finally stepped away from the fire, boots heavy but sure, hands scraping ash from the rail.
Virgil's hand touched hers, steadying, grounding her.
She looked across the scorched yard, chest rising with controlled breaths.
"We stood," she said, voice low, firm.
"We weren't tied," he said, matching her tone. Smoke drifted upward, sunlight fading, casting long shadows over the scorched land.
The ranch was quiet again, hot, heavy with heat and ash, but theirs.
They had faced fire, watched it consume what once controlled them, and remained unbroken. Outside, the sirens faded, dust settling over scorched earth. Eliza's eyes swept across the yard, over fallen fence posts, and to the far edge of the property. Virgil stood beside her, steady, strong, silent. They had faced it all,
and for the first time, the land and its ghosts recognized their presence not as victims, but as witnesses, survivors, and unyielding. The fire made the truth loud, and they had answered. The smoke curled into the sky, black and orange, fading slowly into twilight. The ranch waited, whole, scarred, theirs. And for the first time in a long while, the wind carried no threat, only ash, dust, and the quiet promise of what they had earned. Ash settled over the ranch like a thin, gray blanket. The corral posts were blackened, scorched wood still warm under the late afternoon sun. Eliza moved slowly across the yard, boots crunching gravel, fingers brushing lightly over the scorched edges of the fence. Virgil followed behind, silent, scanning the horizon for any signs of return, any shadow that might signal threat. The wind stirred, carrying the faint tang of smoke, dust, and dry grass. "You still want this?" he asked finally, voice low but steady. She stopped mid-step, letting her hands rest on her hips, gaze fixed on the ruins of the corral. "I want to choose it," she said, voice calm, resolute. He nodded slowly, eyes scanning the edges of the property again, posture relaxed but alert. "Not forced," he said. "Not tied. Not scared." She met his gaze, jaw set. "Exactly. I want to rebuild. But differently this time." Silence stretched between them, heavy but purposeful. The remnants of the burned fence smoldered faintly, ash drifting lazily in the wind. She reached down, picking up a charred splinter, letting it crumble in her hands. "Everything they tried to use against me," she said, voice low, "it only made me see what I want to hold on to." Virgil stepped closer, hands relaxed at his sides. "And what's that?" "Freedom," she said, eyes sharp. "And a choice." He glanced toward the horizon where dust still lingered in the far fields, then back at her. "Then that's what we build." Together, they moved toward the house, the air thick with heat and dust, the smell of smoke lingering like memory. Inside, Virgil opened drawers, examining plans, old tools, and scraps of lumber. Eliza watched him, tracing a finger along the edge of the table, hands raw but steady. "We don't rebuild like before," she said, voice quiet. "We build for us, not for anyone else." Virgil nodded. "Fences lower. Open. Not to trap, but to mark." She smiled faintly, the first genuine expression in days. "Boundaries, not prisons." Outside, the sun dipped lower, long shadows pooling across the yard. The remnants of the corral lay like a scar, a reminder of what had been faced. Dust settled over everything, silent witness. Virgil moved to the corner of the yard, picking up a post that had survived the fire. He set it carefully in place. "First one," he said, voice low. Eliza stepped beside him, hands brushing the wood, feeling its rough grain. "Then we do the rest together," she said. He looked at her, nodding once. "Together." The wind shifted, carrying the faint echo of distant animals, the hum of cicadas, the faint whistle of a far-off train. The ranch felt alive again, scarred but breathing. Eliza pulled a hammer from her belt, letting its weight settle in her hands. She sank nails into the post, steady strikes echoing across the yard. Virgil worked beside her, guiding, steadying, but not controlling. Each post, each swing, each placement was deliberate, chosen, a physical testament to resilience. "We're building more than fences," she said quietly, wiping sweat from her brow. "We're building trust. Space. Control." Virgil's hand brushed hers briefly, almost a confirmation. "And safety," he added. "Always that." The sun continued to lower, casting gold across the yard, highlighting the rough edges of the posts, the dust on their boots, the sweat and grime of work done by choice, not force. They paused, hands on the same post, breathing steady, surveying the space around them. "It feels different," she said. "Because it is." "Because we made it different," he said. Silence fell, the wind brushing through weeds, dust settling slowly, the ranch breathing under their feet. They moved to the next post, hammering, placing, deciding, step by step, post by post. Shadows lengthened, the sky deepened to a rich orange, then purple. The air was hot but fading, quiet except for the sound of wood and metal meeting, boots pressing against dirt, wind moving over the land. For the first time since she had been tied, Eliza felt control in her hands.
Virgil's eyes swept over the yard, the partially rebuilt fence, the land they had reclaimed.
After the fence, he said, voice low. We decide what comes next.
She nodded, determination bright in her eyes.
We decide everything.
The last rays of sun hit the tops of posts, casting long, deliberate shadows over the yard.
Dust swirled lazily, settling, holding memory and warning in equal measure.
Together, they worked, side by side, no longer tethered by fear, no longer bound by threat. They rebuilt, post by post, hammer by hammer, choosing what to hold onto, what to leave behind. The air was quiet but alive, full of promise. The land bore witness to their decision, the ranch breathing under their hands. And in that quiet aftermath, they found something heavier, steadier than survival choice, partnership, and the power to stand, finally unbound.